The House narrowly passed the Save America Act, which is, again, a GOP-backed bill that would tighten up voter registration identification requirements. We've talked about this over the last few days as the idea of voter ID becomes more prevalent, some kind of standardized voter identification program. Of course, this is one of those issues that comes up, it feels like, time and time again, and no one... And look, I'm happy for you to call me and tell me why. No one has ever been able to give me a convincing reason why we should not have some sort of standardized identification program in terms of voting. Why you should not be required to show some kind of ID. What this would do to be able to register to vote, you would need a government-issued ID and one other form of verification. So that could be a driver's license, birth certificate, passport, something like that to register. And then after that, a photo ID would suffice. I've never voted, except for when I had to vote absentee, I guess, when I was in college. I've never voted without the use of some form of identification. Here in Tennessee, I think it's probably the standard. But here we are, and this conversation, which feels like it should not even exist, still does. And the reason why it continues to happen, and look, this passed still very narrowly, and it passed through the House. Will now move to the Senate. And though the Republicans hold a majority, we know that this would have to break the filibuster. And there has been some concern with some conservatives. And then there have been some liberals. We know people like John Fetterman who have said, you know what, maybe it's time. But you know who also says it's time? The American people, by a major way. And a major percentage of them believe there should be some sort of identification. This is on CNN, okay? This is on CNN telling you the details of how the American people feel about voter ID and whether they are on the side of it or not, because the Democrats would like you to believe that most people find this to be egregious and racist. But let's hear what CNN has to say.
All this polling on the screen going back since 2018, you'll notice on all of it, it's all north of 75%, 76%, 76%, 76%, 81%, and then 83% in the last year of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj. They favor photo ID to be able to vote.
What about by party? What's the party breakdown?
Yeah, normally you might expect, hey, there'd be a big divide by party with Republicans really for it and Democrats really against it. But not really here. I mean, just take a look here. Favor photo ID to vote. You got 95% of Republicans, pretty much all of them, but even 71% of Democrats favor photo ID to vote. So again, Nicki Minaj posting that on X, and what you see is that the American people, actually, it's not really all that controversial. The American people are with Nicki Minaj, whether they are Republican or even if they are Democrats. We're talking about 7 in 10 Democrats agreeing with Nicki Minaj that you, in fact, should show a voter photo ID to vote.
He's not wrong. This has become commonplace. Most people, 70+%, okay? If you want any election by 70% in 2026, it would be considered the biggest landslide in our lifetime, as we are so split. We are so divided by party, unfortunately. And people were asked, including Senator John Fetterman, was asked on Fox Business specifically about this. And his response, nuanced, thinking about it, but also clearly looking at where people stand on this and where people stand specifically even within his own district and within his own party. So let's now take a listen. This is from Fox Business.
What I don't understand, Senator, is why it is so difficult to get the SAVE Act into the portfolio and onto the floor. What's wrong with having an ID to vote? Chuck Schumer last week said if the SAVE Act even attempts to get to the Senate, it is dead on arrival. Why?
And now, me as a Democrat, I do not believe that it's unreasonable or to show ID just to vote. And I remind everybody that less than a year ago in Wisconsin, they added that to the Constitution by a 63%, passing to put that in the Constitution that you have to show ID to vote. And they also elected a very, very liberal justice into their Supreme Court. So it's not a radical idea for regular Americans to show your ID to vote.
Yeah, not a radical idea for regular Americans to show your ID to vote. I can tell you that seems to be 100% or it's certainly not a radical idea, even if you disagree with it. Let's go ahead. I want you to hear from this. This is from Steve Scalise. I think he gives you a good sort of overall briefing on this situation. Take a listen.
Try going into a bar without showing a picture ID. Try getting into the Democrat National Convention without showing an ID. They required it. The same Democrats that are saying things like Jim Crow said you have to have an ID to get into their own convention because they know it's common sense. If you want to have a secure operation in anything, and elections are the most important franchise we have in America to protect democracy. And so, yes, we had a really important vote. Great to see one Democrat. Really perplexing why every other Democrat wanted to support voter fraud. That's really what you're supporting if you voted no tonight. You're saying you're okay with voter fraud. And that's a disgrace. Look at states that have done this. Georgia, they said all those same things, by the way, in the state of Georgia, that passed a voter ID requirement. And what happened in the next election after? You had to actually higher voter participation.
But they're going to spin it, and they're going to spin it as somehow it's racist to do this. And again, I've actually said it's racist to have the other way around. I actually have a pretty big issue with using race as a reason why certain things cannot happen, like being able to show an ID. I think when we start to trivialize people, when we start to break it down and make it seem it's actually inherently racist to say the other way, to say that people of a certain background or of a certain color skin, oh, they're not going to be able to figure out this complicated system. They're not going to be able to make it down to a DMV. They're going to be able to get their identification. It's itself disturbing. Let's quickly take one. Let's go to Deborah real quick in North Carolina. Deborah, go ahead.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for what you do. As an African-American that grew up in the South in the 60s, I was glad to hear the comments that you made about requiring photo ID is racist. That is so insulting to me as an African-American. It's insinuating that we're stupid. We can do anything else we want to do. We can get driver's license, ID, cell phones. But according to our Democrats, we don't have sense enough to get ID. Democrats have very, very seldom done anything but undermine the prosperity and well-being of the African-American community, and they've used us for years, and I think that we're finally waking up.
Deborah, I love that comment. And look, you grew up in the South in the 60s. You understand the issues that came on. My family grew up in the South in the 60s. The stories I've been told, I understand, though I was not there. And I grew up in the South in the 80s and 90s. Still, racism certainly existed, but we lived in very diverse communities. I understand that there are certain situations where we do need to push back hard against things. And one of those things is when you're told a certain community, based on the color of their skin, is not smart enough, does not have the ability to do a simple task in 2026.